the intelligent device of the world. I want to immediately warn that nothing interesting and entertaining will be here. There will be an explanation of the structure of the world, but not scientific, as is customary. And not religious, as is not customary. If I say science, then you need to quickly remember not only Einstein, but all the scientists, as well as the contradictory and fantastic evidence that science uses in its hypotheses. Further, I simply do not advise reading. To put it simply, do not sour the brains of those who believe only in science or only in religion, or that our country is the best in the world, and not because I'm not a patriot. If you believe in religion, then this should be forbidden to you, and if you believe in science, then you will not be interested. Because I wonder why religion consists of sufferers. Why should they always suffer, and through suffering come to God? Why, they promise us the kingdom of heaven. Where is heavenly life? Maybe they are trying again to palm off something that nobody needs. It is strange that sinners will be punished, and not those who cause suffering. I must endure because God endured and commanded us. And why did He order? So does He love or command us? I then. What to do, love Him or be afraid? Therefore, if you spend 2 hours on one proposal, then you will understand something, but not all. Do not tell us what we believe. Coronavirus says, do you need to wash not only your hands, but also your brains? What a magnificent idea! If you don't wash your hands and don't wear a mask, then you never mind someone else's life. So yours, God does not need. You feast during the plague. Evolution is for everyone, the smartest survives. But then comes the state, and begins to save everyone. The state needs working hands, and you do not care if you are a cultural person, anyway, if only it would bring income to the state. Why does the state interfere in the evolutionary process? Where is morality, and where is morality? Who needs a cultural but impoverished state? Creating a culture for money is nonsense. To understand the overmind is to understand the structure of the world. Look carefully, the world is created by the overmind and it is difficult to understand. Otherwise, why create it? What to study? But we do not study it, but fantasize about space, and dream of flying to where everything is possible. But on Earth, which we do not find, are there always two options, or a burial ground or an observatory? What a terrible life our ancestors had, looked at the stars and died. Why would a peasant look at the stars when he can pick up the earth, feel its warmth and say, it's time to sell? And the stars are needed in order to give them to loved ones, because you will not give a star, you will not fall into. Does this mean that the world is reasonably arranged when even a joke makes you think smart and have fun, of another? Think with your mind, not your brains. Before justifying the rational structure of the world, I wanted to determine what we mean by the word rational, and therefore the mind itself. Bearing in mind, not the presence of neurons and synapses in the overmind, of which, according to scientists, our mind consists. The supermind created the mind, and then the rational world, and not a random coincidence of events where the mind has already appeared, in an evolutionary or other way. This means that the understanding of the overmind is connected with the understanding of God, that is, His primacy, primordiality, as religion interprets it. But I'm not talking about identity, but the beginning in understanding also means the end. And if the beginning and the end, then the question is about the frequency, for some, a certain period. We cannot ignore all the knowledge that we have already obtained from the history of science, which we can discuss, that is, speak with all the sciences at our disposal. This means understanding the rational structure of the world, with the presence of the overmind, is possible only when not only physics and astronomy will be connected to this issue, as the first ones participating in the emergence of the world, but also all sciences related to understanding or studying the mind, in the generally accepted brain. The appearance of physical laws in the first instance of an explosion? Too fantastic, even for the most fantastic science. When we discuss the emergence of the world through the Big Bang, we limit its occurrence to physical laws, and then astronomical, believing that the explosion came from compression, and not from a chemical reaction. And then the vast expanses of the universe and the appearance of astronomy already appear? So it's convenient for us. So science arises in response to actions, that is, what happened. But what happened must have time for it to happen. There can be no astronomy until stars appear, or their formations. Therefore, the appearance of the law of the origin of the explosion, before the explosion, can only be in one case. The presence of the overmind, not subject to physical laws, and therefore creating them. Only then can the world be viewed from the point of view of the mind. The rest of the sciences are resting, in the sense that they are not even in the project yet. Let's continue. The beginning and end of the physical world can only be in the presence of the main factor, time. These two concepts can be discussed. When there is time, only it can fix the beginning and the end. If there is no time, then how can one say something happened? There is no beginning of the event, so there is no end to it. Who turned on the time? It is reasonable and rational to assume that the overmind has existed, always. And time, this is already his creation, as the axis on which events are dressed, like skewers. On the spatio-temporal continuum, I will explain later. With the presence of the superintellect and the world created by him, everything changes dramatically, because here one physics or astronomy is not possible, where there is a sequence, but there is no reason. The intelligent structure of the world is not a coincidence, as one of the theories suggests. And the presence of many rational decisions, interlinked, rational and rationally connected. So the rational, connected with the rational, confirms the rational, and not the rational with the rational, confirms, not the rational. That is, it is impossible to consider the creation of the earth, without the appearance of mountains, deserts, as well as the ocean and everything around, and without the creation of man? Therefore, it is necessary to discuss this in a complex, although it can be considered separately. All growing fruits are placed in the hand, or in two, and a sip of water in the palm of your hand. What a clever evolution, so much like the overmind. Then why are we trying to insert the rational into the non-rational? The science of geology studies natural materials, but man needs them for his activity, and this connection, the rational structure of the world, is the presence of the ocean, mountains, and other geographical objects closely related to humans. What makes us climb mountains and conquer peaks? Reason or evolution? Man and his environment, this is one whole creation of the overmind. If the world was created by the overmind, then no event can be accidental. Everything has its goals and objectives. Creating a reasonable world around us, when everything is perfect in it, is it not possible to imagine the creation of a round earth and such a huge sun that illuminates our entire solar system? Any thinking person understands that shining where nothing grows is not reasonable, that is, not rational. Then, there is harmony and harmonious development of the world, when everything is rational, but not invented. Is gold created to tempt, and is this a direct connection with psychology, ethics, and culture? But gold is metal with physical and other properties, and that's it. Oil is not an accidental formation, but a foresight of our progress and our development. And this, a fundamental difference from other theories of the emergence of the world that cannot combine, all in one. In fact, there can only be two theories. This is a rational structure of the world and not rational, that is, random, imagined, which can create many options for building the world, which we observe. One is real and rational, that is, rational, and the other is fictional and fantastic. All of them are derivatives, since they do not have sources, so panspermia does not answer the question, where did life come from, or a molecule brought by meteorites to our planet? The source is not known. The same thing with parallel worlds and matrices, because there must be someone who created them and wrote programs for them. It is not possible the existence of two theories in one, that is, it, as the superintelligence, creates or carries out the Big Bang, the explosion is created for destruction, and no scientific fantasies or hypotheses can change these physical properties. For the supermind there are no trifles, moreover for him there is no main and secondary. Absolutely everything that is created exists. The question of the emergence of the world lies not in the plane of physical appearance, but in our mind. Why does the mind come up with new hypotheses? Why, while studying the brain and marveling at its abilities, capabilities, do we draw such primitive conclusions? Nobody pulled science for language, that it would prove that when the brain is bad, it will force the human body to do what the brain likes. Because only the human brain, losing to the Sharpie in the cards, will argue that this is by accident. And we believe, and sit down to play again? When I began to consider a person from a different angle, just shocked, limitless stupidity, next to such conceit. You can say, brilliant to stupidity, and stupid to genius. Why are we proving that the brain is the most important thing? We convince ourselves and others that it supposedly evolves, although vaguely imagine where and what evolution must develop. If evolution is the best, then why so many fools? So the presence of fools refutes evolution. And the number of believers in anything just makes evolution funny. In order for diversity to appear, reason is needed. That is, studying ourselves, we indirectly study the Creator, who cannot create the mind without anything like that at hand. And at hand he has only his own mind. Then it is reasonable or logical to assume that for some reasons, they are identical. That is, it is impossible to say to what extent, or quality, and other parameters they are close, but we can say with confidence about their fundamental connection. Therefore, it is reasonable and rational that it communicates with me with the help of thought, as a part of the mind created for contacts with it, above the mind. Think for yourself about the hypotheses that all science holds. Protecting stupidity is not a virtue, but a habit. We are after the revolution, against God, but does that mean against reason? Explaining the existence of the overmind, I have the right to use all scientific and non-scientific data for my justification, since this does not contradict our mind, no matter how it appears, by chance or not. The scientific understanding of the overmind, that is, it simply does not exist. And this means that any hypothesis can be reliable. So I am free from evidence, explanations, and other things that science requires for its understanding, and then approval. This is also implied when we talk about a fundamental divergence in the appearance of the world. Refuting science, I refute its dogma. This of course simplifies my task, since there is no need to prove it. But is there still a reasonable explanation for everyone, including myself? There is also a third opportunity to prove nothing to anyone. It is impossible to prove to someone who does not understand. And this is an axiom. The evidence used by science is so contradictory, not logical, not rational, and simply not reasonable, but pleasing to the brain, because it is fantastic. And this is a favorite pastime of the brain. The brain does not like to be strained. And when the hypotheses are confirmed, other dubious hypotheses, and then, suddenly declared proven. Some strange concept, the theory, not fantastic enough to be right or true. Some kind of nonsense. And the dominance of scientific terminology simply makes it impossible to understand what is at stake, in fact. For example, see our topic. And so I write on the internet, the smartest device in the world. Got out one. The device of the mind. Laws and the structure of the mind. The device of the inner world. Conversations and disputes in psychology classes. I open and read. The higher mind consists of spaces of masculine and feminine principles, which make up a single whole, which is triple inside, and outside it is fivefold. Not bad for a start, although it's clear, these are fantasies of our brain. But let's look further. The evolution and intelligent structure of the world. Click Enter. Further, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Pretty quickly in the second paragraph religion is already dictating its rights. I wonder how they managed to cross evolution with divine creation. Probably science helped again? Will we try to look for something more reasonable or approximately reasonable? Followed by the prison of reason. 5 not obvious facts about thinking. Open. Here an attempt to explain thinking itself is quite interesting, but not for our topic. Scrolling further, evidence of the existence of God. Chapter 3. The intelligent structure of the world. Read the proof that the Bible is a book from God. It's good that we have such a fantastic brain that will explain to me that God doesn't write with a pen, but the saints do it. I also doubt that the observer in a quantum field can also write. Click Enter. 4. In accordance with the plan. An interesting start. We open the Bible. Close. I will try to poke myself. It seems to have found. 5. The philosophy of the mind. We open. Philosophy, ethics, religious studies. Authors, further keywords. And so it is important for me, rationalism. Push on Enter. And so rationalism in modern knowledge. Read the announcement. A mystical romantic flight from the collective mind. Despite what the ancients said, not everything that is known is expressible, but not everything is not expressible. It is precisely in times of crisis that rationalism has to defend its right to cultural existence. The triumph of methodology awareness of the fundamental non-disclosure of the secret led to differentiation. The supernatural is denied the right to exist only for the sake of an illusory methodological purity. You understand right away, this is science. This is the amazing ability of science, meaningless, to give meaning that is understandable, first of all to science, through the complication of concepts. And another chapter, between solipsism and scientism or not scientistic rationality. Here it is, rationality. If we understand this, it will be the same stupidity. There is nothing from the rational, that is, the rational. Because of this, I do not like science. It is not rational, but symbolic, because there is nothing behind the terminology, and everything takes us either into space, where there are no borders, or into the dense forest of self-deception. Thus, it is not possible to comprehend the overmind and prove it scientifically. There is nothing to prove. We adore our brain, which makes us idiots and geniuses, and science honestly acknowledges that there is no difference between genius and idiot. Let's see what is solipsism. This is an extreme subjective idealism, recognizing the only reality, only its own consciousness, and denying the existence of the external world. Let us consider more closely extreme subjective idealism, the least problems with the concept of extreme, although here it is not so simple. Extreme, this is probably the last, that is, located on the edge, but with the edge of what? Probably a surface, or area. But maybe the volume. If this is the volume, then what is it and its shape? If it is inside the arc, can it be considered extreme? And if it is a surface, then where is this extreme point? Extreme, to me or to the opposite edge, but then it is no longer extreme, at least for me. Is it possible to consider the middle point of the two extremes as absolutely extreme? According to the scientist, wisdom, my mind will allow you to drag endlessly, because I do not limit it to anything. And if I add here, subjective idealism, of my opinion, then I torture you only by listing the place of the subject in the understanding of the objective. Does the subject exist inside the objective? At the same time, I'll prove to you without much difficulty that the existence of the subject in the objective is a necessary measure for assessing the objective itself. Otherwise, why, the existence of an observer in a quantum field. And if I take you to a quantum field, you will eat grass, which is surrounded by the sea. And only I understand what kind of grass you eat, and on which field graze. Then try to explain, did you eat your grass, or mine? Can I just list any words, warning you that this is a complex scientific concept? And will you already be completing them with your pictures in your brains? Then listen further, objectively, all this is a bowel movement of my imagination from the subjective to the objective. That is my thinking in yours. Scientific knowledge is that we first come up with a hypothesis, and then we find confirmation of it. So fiction, science fiction, is the basis of our knowledge. It is obvious. In the painting by abstractionists we see a horse with a cart, but coming closer, we find only smears of paint. The image created our brain. So reality is brain inventions in which we believe. Therefore, when the overmind reports that more than half of what you see is not reality, the perception of the real changes significantly. What is the difference between truth and lies? To admit the truth is 4 strokes, or a horse with a wagon. We are not interested, strokes, we are interested in the fantastic conclusion that our brain loves, and makes us do it. What do we learn? Strokes of paint, or a horse with a wagon. We do not need reality, we need symbols. We all know that in the mausoleum lies a symbol, in the form of Lenin, which we need to educate and develop society, in the direction necessary for the state. We all know that the state, any, is a repressive apparatus. We don't have enough brains to come up with something else. We know that symbols are a banner and a hymn, a motherland, and other attributes. But if we are honest and truthful, then we must admit that in the mausoleum lies the half-decomposed troop, which we are trying to preserve, because the symbols must live forever. This is an obvious fact that you can't get anywhere from, to tell the truth. But lying is easier than proving that the dead should be buried, and the symbols should lead to goals, if any. When we talk about Christ, does it never occur to anyone to blame him for the murder itself? Then who is he, knowing that he will be crucified, goes for it? When we say to the servant, "Kill me," this is not a suicide, is it just a murder that we pass on to the wrong shoulders? Or shoot me, I can't. The same laws prevail in religion as in the state, there must be symbols, and it is desirable that they die. And definitely for the idea. Lenin for a new redivision, who was nothing, that will become everything. And Jesus Christ, for eternal life. Somewhere I came across information that instead of Christ, crucified another. And Jesus ended his life rationally and rationally, which is absolutely correct. But the symbol must die in order to live in our consciousness. Our existence without this is not possible, but you need a very stubborn mind to have, so as not to understand the obvious. Not to see what lies before your eyes, instead to fantasize by inventing the difficulties that you need to circumvent by inventing even greater difficulties. Does it need an amazing mind? And we have it, and just such, smart, and dumb, at our request? Or by conviction, the one who convinced us, or others convinced us? It is important for me to understand why, such a brain? And leave this fantasy in the form of black holes, or unknowableness of the unknowable, to scientists, with their random brain. Listen to the first conclusion, the overmind has no fantasies at all, because they are not rational. Perfection cannot be, something is not perfect. He can't fantasize, which means he's lying because he doesn't think up, he will do everything. And we, on the contrary, come up with golden pens, and make pens from the S. I deliberately joke, because the topic is so complex that you can't stop it without jokes, the strain of thought. How do you explain that, after 70 years, I affirm, without even trying to prove that the existence of the overmind is the only way to justify the emergence of the mind, which is higher in complexity than the creation of the universe? I know that. And only knowing this, can I talk about it, for those who do not know this, and can only believe or not believe in it. To prove to you that I communicate with the overmind. But why? Will you give me the Nobel Prize? What can you give me if I do not need anything, if I communicate with it? And I do it. Moreover, I know how to approach that to communicate with him and will tell you just like that. And just because with whom you will lead, from that you will pick up. It does not require anything from me, unlike the religious God, who makes me tremble all my life, because she will punish me. The overmind is reality, which I am trying to explain, but we prefer science fiction, reality. Let's get back to rationality, this important understanding of it. I will later explain why we lie all the time, continuing to fight for the truth. In religion, God is not knowable, because it is a symbol. In reality, it really wants to be realized and understood, because it is rational. Run, or scamper across the sky and scare everyone that you are the most omnipotent, and can you do with us anything? It is not clear only to anyone, please. This is not rational, because if I am smart and understand that it exists, and that it created such a wonderful and complex world, then even a fool can understand that my life is a tear in the eyes of the Lord, or a grain of sand in the desert. It is necessary to frighten the one who is not, but to frighten, forcing to believe, this is the most primitive way that only a person can use, but not the Creator. Why scare me with being mortal? Do not frighten the scare, still come may. This is not rational. So it will never do that. And most importantly, when the overmind exists, and I affirm it, then it makes no sense to talk about the existence of the other world. This is becoming obvious. Dying for it is not necessary, it is reasonable and rational, the continuation of existence, but more on that later. When I communicate with it, then I rise and soar above all. But it tells me, I have no favorites. I sat in a puddle again, because I understand the dirt of my thoughts, and I understand how we want to put all the bad ones against the wall. But why? Now I understand how many times in my life it warned me, and sometimes it saved me, as our angels say. I physically do not understand how can God be in the image and likeness. If he is everywhere, then he is not material. And it knows, reading my thoughts, and therefore says to me, when you think of me, call me it. I understand that my mind is too weak to understand the overmind, but it already determines the direction for understanding. It is not he and not it is rather the beginning. For me it is more like an observer in a quantum field, in whose place we are trying to put a person, exaggerating his capabilities and lying, that it is possible to achieve what is not possible according to our biological laws. For those who believe in science and think that these are the quirks of my brain, which supposedly can do anything. This is so elementary. If I affirm, after 70 years of thinking, then at least live to these years, without insanity, and faith, in everything that is offered to you. To acknowledge the existence of God is faith, and proof needs intelligence. Therefore, science cannot survive without space, this is the only place where fantasies turn into reality. But the mind refutes them, since it was created by the overmind, that is, it. We are only by reason like the Creator, everything else is our fiction. The difficulty is that I understand how incredibly difficult it is to believe, I even argue that it is not possible. It told me, do good, and throw it into the sea. And with him, I do not argue. Today I talked about rationality, as an important property of it. The next part will be an analysis of the lies in our lives, where I will try to explain why it is necessary for us. Good luck to all.